the podcast, that's like the top of the funnel, right? Everything else will come in to get, will come downstream. So that's why, again, my question is all about growing my audience, because like you said, if I go from 100 people listening to every episode to 1,000, like that's going to equate to me making more money. Like there's just no way that it doesn't.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, what's up, podcaster? It is your host, Adam Adams. And today I have one of those coaching calls that becomes free for the person that is being coached. Usually they're $500. And Paul Levitin's had his podcast for a while. In fact, I was looking at it for the first time. He and I have been friends on social for a while. And I didn't really know that he had the podcast. I didn't know what he did, but we've somehow gotten connected. And I made a post on social and said, hey, anybody who's out there who wants a free coaching call and will record it, drop a comment below. And now we're on that call and I'm looking at his podcast for the first time and it's remarkable. There's some really good content. Like I haven't listened to it yet. I'll be honest. I haven't listened, but I just noticed the last few episodes and they're pretty badass. He's got some experience, 107-ish episodes as we record that are already published. And so I think his questions are probably going to relate to a lot of you who've been podcasting for maybe a little less than 2 years, or even if you're just barely starting, you're probably going to learn something. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul and we're going to go from there. Paul, actually, there is one thing that I wanted to say. We started to get into this. One thing about Happy, Healthy Human. And if you're listening, that link is already in the show notes. So Paul's bio is in the show notes. Go ahead and scroll down. And the link to his company is in the show notes. So you can get his coaching or whatever. It's already in the show notes. Scroll down. And the link to his podcast, Happy, Healthy Human, that's been going for 107 episodes as we record so far. There's one little piece that I wanted to bring up first, Paul, like a coaching thing. You say on there that it is clean. And do you cuss at all?
I mean, personally, in my personal life, I'm not anti-cursing.
I mean, on the show.
On the show. So I do a split solo and guest episodes. The solo episodes are just me. I don't curse in those. But if the guest episodes, people are talking, like I don't instruct them not to curse. I tell them, just talk like you normally would. So there definitely are some episodes where some people have dropped an S or whatever, but it's not like a lot or overtly.
So the one thing that I want to recommend, I learned this from another podcaster, and I've done just a little bit of research on it and found it to be true. So there's this podcaster that has a podcast about podcasting. I think it's called Just a Tip or something like that. Don't remember the guy's name, but they're cool episodes because they're like only 6 minutes. And one of them talked a little bit about cussing, and he found a few people that actually got their podcast completely like deleted, taken down without warning and all of that. And so in that episode where I first learned it, he mentioned if you ever cuss on any of your episodes or talk about explicit content, you should go ahead and change that little button from clean to explicit and mark it with an E. And absolutely, certainly, any episode where there's an F-bomb or S-bomb or something else, you want to go ahead and mark that as explicit as well. But it can be better for you in the long run if Apple catches you or something like this, that there is an F-bomb, but you say clean, then it can be scary for them because they're willing to send kids to your podcast or people that don't want any cursing. It says clean, but it's not technically clean. It's mostly clean. And actually, what's cool about that guy from Just a Tip or whatever it's called, he also mentioned that if you mark it as not clean, then you're typically shown to more people as well. And so you can get a bigger reach. And for him, that's exactly what he did. And now he's getting more downloads than he did before. And so that could be like a small thing. And I always say when people book these calls, whether they do it for free and we record it or whether they pay $500, I want to 10x that. I'm hoping to give you $5,000 of value. And that might be more than $5,000 of value. Just switch that to explicit and maybe you get more listenership. Maybe you have a less probability of actually getting shut down and blocked. And hopefully 1 or 2 clients can pay you because you do coaching and consulting and you help. Is it men and women, or is it just, I think I missed that part.
Men and women.
Okay. So you help people to be able to have more self-confidence, be better in business, be more congruent with themselves, and be able to make more money. And because of that, you probably make some money. Do you charge for your coaching, I assume?
Yes.
Cool. And how many clients would it take you to make $5,000? All right. Perfect. So let's get you 2 more clients just from that one little change. And now I'll turn it over to you.
That's a great tip. And I'll make sure to do that literally right when we get off this call. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. So I want to turn it over to you though. If you've got a question or 2 or 3 prepared, your top questions, sometimes we can't go 4 questions deep in this amount of time because I'm going to try to just give you everything. If you're asking a question, I'm going to give you enough details on it. So what are your top 2 or 3 questions that we can get started with?
Well, I mean, the biggest question and the thing that I need the most help with and struggle with the most is, I'm sure, what everyone struggles with, and what the biggest question that you probably get is simply around growth. Specifically, right, as you mentioned, I have about 100. I think today I released my 108th episode. I've been doing this for just about 2 years. I release an episode a week consistently. I missed one time in the earlier weeks of it, but since then I haven't missed one. And my growth is more or less non-existent. It's pretty flat. I have people listen, but it's the same. I have between, I would say, 150 to 250 downloads per episode, right? All total on between like 40 and 50,000 cumulative downloads over the last 2 years, which isn't nothing.
Say that number one more time. Did you say 20,000 in 2 years?
Between over 40,000, I think. So between
40,000.
Yeah.
So, wow, a couple things. You aren't doing bad with 40,000 in 2 years, because I think that the stat was, I don't remember, and I don't want to misquote it. I'm going to pretend like it was 90%, but I could be wrong. But it's high. It's well over half of podcasters barely reach 5 or 10,000 after 1 or 2 years. So 100-ish, it's a little low, but 150 downloads in an episode is a little low. It puts you, I think, in the top 50%, or bottom 50. It's right there in the middle if you're at that 100, 150 mark. And if you had 300 downloads per episode, that's where you would hit top 10%. And that's where I want you to be, as minimum at top 10%. So let's almost double or slightly above double where you are now. And so let's talk about what it's going to take, because Paul's asking, hey, I've been putting my heart, soul, my effort, my time, my attention, and probably some money as well into the podcast. And it's been around this 100, 150 downloads per episode mark. What can I do differently? Paul, one thing that I think you mentioned is some of your episodes are solo, some of them are interview. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's okay. Every other week, it's 50-50.
Every other week. All right. The first piece of advice that I'll share with you is a piece of advice that's not easy. And so you might not be able to do it. And the listener might be overwhelmed as well. They're like, yeah, anything but that. I'm already having a harder time doing this. How could I double it? But I'll let you know that it's kind of like the term synergy. 1 + 1 equals more than 2. It's the same thing when podcasting. 2 episodes is more than twice as valuable to you as 1 episode, more than twice. So it's not just that you're putting out twice as much. The few things that happen when you are putting out extra content is additional shareability. More people could share. More people will listen. There's another thing. If you're publishing once a week, and like this week, I'm going to do a solo, next week, I'm going to do an interview, and then wait a whole nother week, you're only having 2 guests in a month on average, right? You're averaging 2.175 or something like this guests per month. And so that only gives you the ability of having 2 people share an episode with their audience, with their following, with their listener. Now, but if by any chance you could double your episodes and do 4.3 solos a month and 4.3 interviews a month, then now you're having 4-ish people that could share. So you're doubling that. And some of them have small audience, some of them have big audience, some of them will share, some of them won't share, but you're going to get more than with that synergy, you're going to get a higher probability of getting more people listening. So that's one thing, double your content. And you're like, well, I'm already not getting value. I'm already not getting what I want. It's already not growing. Why would I put more time, more money into it? I want it to work and then I'll do it. And it just doesn't always work like that. Think about just investing. Let's just pretend like the stock market or crypto or real estate worked. I don't care if you're listening and you think one of them doesn't work or does work or did work for you, it didn't work for your mom, and people tell you not to do it. Let's just pretend they all work and you're choosing one of them. You're going to invest in the stock market or real estate or what else? What did I say? Crypto. Well, unfortunately, when you're thinking about investing, but the money's not there, nothing happens yet. You kind of got to jump off a cliff, leap of faith. You kind of got to actually invest it before it'll return something. And that's similar to the podcast. It's scary. It's vulnerable. We're thinking it's not working right now. We're not sure if it's working. We're not sure if putting more, doubling the money, doubling the time, doubling the effort will do anything at all for us. But once we put that dollar in, or that $100,000 in, or that $1 million, add or take away as many zeros as you want for investing. Once we add that, we will get a little bit more value. I want to illustrate this with a quick story. I used to do a lot of real estate investing. Now I have a small portfolio, a couple of apartment buildings and a few houses. At one point it was very large and always felt impressive. Now it's kind of small. And at any rate, I used to speak at a lot of conferences around the country. I was always invited to almost every conference for apartment investing, owned by different companies, big ones, small ones. And I felt really good about myself. One of those days, I was speaking at Joe Fairless's conference. He's a podcaster. He does a daily podcast. This is where I'm coming with this, a daily podcast. I was backstage getting ready to go on. I had to be the guy who followed up Joe. Joe was speaking. The person running the whole show was speaking, and I had to go next. And so I was like, oh, crap, people are going to leave. But the cool thing is there was this lady that raised her hand right before I was going to go on. It was Q&A with Joe. And she asked a really interesting question. She said, hey, Joe, if you had to do this all over again, would you still do a daily podcast every single day? And Joe didn't even think about it. He didn't even blink. He said, no, I wouldn't do a daily podcast. I'd do a twice daily podcast. If I did it all over again, I'd do a twice daily podcast. And he started listing all of these reasons. Most of them I mentioned to you already. Joe was already doing a daily and he wanted to double it. He couldn't double it because he was the, quote, longest running daily real estate podcast in the world. And he can't just change it to a twice daily. There's just no reason to do that. But he understood algorithms and shareability. And he mentioned this one other thing that I want to share with you right now, Paul. Think about like when you're Googling something, or let's just say searching for something, maybe Yahoo, maybe Google, maybe Bing, maybe who knows what is available to you wherever you live. When you are searching in a search bar for something, generally speaking, you're looking at the first page. If there's nothing there, you might scroll down to the second or third page. And if there's nothing on the second or third page, you're not even going to search for that anymore. You're not going to waste your time and keep going. Well, that's kind of how it is with a podcast. You are searchable through the RSS feed. RSS feed, to those who don't understand this, it means that anytime you update it on your hosting platform, it automatically syndicates everywhere else through an RSS feed. And you get pushed to the top page of Google when you publish an episode. So Joe started to mention one of the biggest benefits is he would be at the very top in front of everybody twice a day, every day. It didn't matter if they came in on Saturday or Sunday or Thursday. It wouldn't matter if they logged in at 6 a.m., 3 p.m., or midnight. He would always be on the first page of Google. And think about the squeaky wheel. all of the wheels are there, but the one that gets the grease is the one that squeaks. So Job decided, I want to become a squeaky wheel. I want to be the one who's always at the first page. People are always thinking about me. I've always got content. Yes, also I'm having a lot more conversations with people. Yes, a lot more people could share me. Yes, I'm able to hack into all these other people's networks. But the bottom line is, the first advice that I give you is to put out more content. Invest more time, energy, money into the podcast, if you can, to grow your audience for so many reasons. Other things that you can do. Tell me about your organic social media strategy. What are you trying to do on Facebook, for example, to get in front of more podcast listeners?
Not much, honestly. I have my coaching business. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and theoretically LinkedIn and TikTok, but I'm not very active on those. So I'm talking about similar topics, right? Because my coaching and my podcast are one and the same. The things that I talk about on social media are just the topics that I also talk about on my podcast. So there's like links of those things, right? I'll talk about a topic like, gratitude versus anxiety or something. And then say, and by the way, if you want to hear more about this, I talk about this in episode 108 of the podcast, but it's more of an afterthought. It's not like a decided strategy of like, I'm talking about the show or I'm sharing the show in different places in different areas, because I just don't really have, a strategy for it.
Actually, I love what you're doing, and it might just need to add a small bit more intention. I think what you're doing is already great. And the listener could probably say, wow, I'm not doing that. I should do that. And so what Paul's saying is currently he will make a post. It'll be a post that benefits his avatar, his listener, his perfect person that he wants to add value to. And then his call to action is a little weak, but it's there. It says, by the way, if you want to hear more about this, I have a podcast episode. If I switched anything, I would use this formula, which you're already doing pretty well at it. I'm going to just share with you hook, story, offer. And I want the story and the offer to be tied into your podcast as well. And the way that I would do it is I would give that value. I would jump in and I would say something like, what was the example that you just mentioned? Anxiety, was it?
Anxiety and gratitude.
And gratitude. So I would say something profound like this, or use a statistic. Say something like completely off the wall, something nobody would ever expect. I'm quitting my job. I'm done doing what I'm doing. I'm no longer going to have my business. I'm going to cancel my podcast. 73% of people experience anxiety. 97.5% people experience anxiety. And it's been proven that those people, those 97%, are making 1/10 of the income they could if they switch to gratitude. Something like that. I don't even know if any of this is true. I'm just like throwing stuff out there that is a hook. You could say something like, you're losing money because you don't have enough gratitude. And people are like, wait, what? I'm losing money? Because it's fear of missing out, right? These are psychological things that help us be drawn to, incite curiosity, make us want to know what is the rest of that post. So you do that, just like you probably are now. You're probably doing really well with stuff like this. And then the next thing is in the story, I want the story to have a lot to do with the podcast. So you go in, I just recorded episode 158 of the podcast, and it talks about the 4 things that you need to do. I'm going to give you just one of them right now. And then you give them the one, and then you say, to listen to the rest of the podcast, to get the other 3 that are even more impactful than the one that I shared with you, comment below and I'll give you the link. I'll DM you the link. So some of the reasons why I say a little bit of this is I don't want you to leave the link actually in the post. There's a lot of reasons why. One is if you put the link in the top in the post, then there's shadow banned. Social media, Facebook, for example, LinkedIn, for example, they will say, oh, hell no. So now we have to be explicit on this because I said hell. They say, oh, hell no, I'm not promoting some podcast where the podcast wants attention, where people will stay on the podcast. I need people to stay on LinkedIn. I need people to stay on Facebook, they say. So we saw a link, we're blocking it. No one's going to see this post. Also, you're not going to put it in the comments. There's a lot of people that say, oh, do not put it in the post. Instead, put it in the comments. And their justification is that you don't trigger that negative algorithm. Well, what I'm saying is it doesn't matter if you're triggering that negative algorithm at all, because the other benefit is social proofing. You want people to comment. You want other people to say, man, a lot of people seem to want to know how to do this anxiety thing to gratitude thing. I should probably want to do that too. Just because we see it, a lot of people are commenting, we're going to comment also. Third reason, you'll trigger a positive algorithm within the social media platform by not having it in the post, not having it in the comments, but making people actually engage is going to trigger an algorithm where social says, wow, a lot of people engage on Paul's post. And there's this other person's post that's not engaging that posted at the same time. So we'll go ahead and squash that person's post and we'll promote in front of more of his friends. Instead of 10 of his friends, let's try to put it in 30 of his friends and see what happens. Oh, more people are commenting, engaging. They like this post. They're staying on Facebook. Paul's helping us on Facebook make more money because our investors, advertisers are doing better. I'm going to keep putting in front. Now it's in front of 100 of your friends and it's working again. Now it's in 200 of your friends. And so instead of 10 of your friends even seeing a post, now 200 or 300 of your friends see the post. So there's so many different benefits. So use this hook story offer, give this outlandish thing. What did I say before? A statistic, or just draw your line in the sand and say, this is how the post that you commented on, Paul, why we're talking today. My hook was, I've known many people that say that you can't make money podcasting. To them, so that now that's my hook. My perfect avatar, a podcaster, is going to read it. They're going to say, wait, what? I've got some curiosity. I'm wondering what he's going to say. Is he saying you can make money? I've had my podcast, Paul says, for 2 years and haven't made that much money on my podcast. What is Adam going to say? So they keep reading on. And then I go to them, I say, I just paid off a couple of rentals. So I'm a real estate investor as well. And I have these 2 small rentals and I was able to pay off these mortgages because I brought in enough money through the podcast and I didn't know what to do with the money. I'm like, you know what? These are high interest rates. I'll just go ahead and pay them off. So I say that in the post. And then my listener, my followers thinking, man, maybe I could do that. And then I come up with my call to action and it's not, and then I don't remember. I probably got like 200 or more comments on that. Which made Facebook say, Adam's making us money. So they're just pushing it in front of more and more people. And there was a few people, a couple people, there was 2 that said, actually, side tangent, a few is 2 or more. I never knew that until I actually looked it up. I always thought it had to be 3 to 5. That I always thought that, but the definition does say 2. So a couple, but also a few people commented to me and they're like, 5 weeks after the post, they're like, I can't believe this is still showing up in my feed. Well, it's still showing up in your feed because it's getting engagement and Facebook wants to make money. So that's what I want you to do. Hook story offer. You're losing money because you don't have enough gratitude. And there's 4 tips that can help you have more gratitude and lose the anxiety that's holding you back. I'm going to just give you, I just recorded an episode. Now we're in the story. I just recorded an episode about the 4 things. I'm going to give you one of them right now. And if you want to listen to the podcast episode, just let me know in the comments and I will DM you the link. That's a perfect post. It's going to get tons of engagement and it's going to help you make more money.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. That's super helpful. And using the podcast as kind of like the actual content of the post rather than being like an afterthought of being like, hey, this is what I talked about, and like, here's what it is. And here's why you want to listen to more. Is definitely something I haven't been doing. And I can see how that would definitely be helpful and drive more engagement.
Yeah. It's just adding a tad more, it starts with an I, intention. Just a little bit more intention. You already have the intention, but it's just honing it in a slight more than you have right now so far.
Mm-hmm.
You want to grow your audience. Other things you can do, you can basically, you can invest in your podcast by marketing, growth. My company does that, but we're crazy expensive. So look at it if you want to. And then a lower cost way to do it is you can go to Buzzsprout. Write this down. If you're listening or if you're Paul, write this down. Go to Buzzsprout and you can pay for impressions, downloads, basically. You can pay for impressions on other people's podcasts by doing an ad of your show. So like where people would say on another person's podcast that was kind of in the same genre as yours, then you would have this ad on their podcast that says, go to Healthy Happy Human podcast in order to get this value. And you still use the hook story offer even in the ads. I use hook story offer on my podcast. I use hook story offer on my social. I use hook story offer everywhere that I can. So you'll use that and that'll be on other people's podcasts. And what's cool is you can pay as of the day that we're recording. I think that the prices are $200 per 10,000 or $100 per 5,000 impressions. So you have been downloaded on, let's call it 10 people's podcasts in your genre, and collectively they have 10,000 listeners and they all do download that episode. Doesn't necessarily mean they've listened to the episode, but they did download it. You're going to pay $200. It's a fairly low cost investment in order to get more people. And my favorite part of that type of advertising on like Buzzsprout is that every single listener of that other person's podcast does listen to podcasts. 100% of them do listen to podcasts. So it's kind of easy for them if they already listen to this person in your genre. It's kind of easy for them to be like, ooh, healthy, happy, let's do it. And they move over. They'll be able to subscribe to you and you get a certain amount and that can help you grow. And the last thing that I'll say on this before you go to your next question is, you should be getting interviewed on other people's shows. There's some companies out there such as Interview Valet. I think my company has a affiliate relationship with. I like them. And so I told the guy, hey, I want to make money when I send people to you because I'm going to send people to you already. And they do a really good job. If you got to pay them and they get you on other people's shows. But now it's not just a 30-second ad, for example. It's not just a 30-second or 1 minute or 15-second ad that you're running on these people's shows. You're actually there to add value to the audience. And I think it's a higher probability that they will say, oh, let me check out his podcast. So by getting interviewed on other people's shows, you're hacking all of those networks. I use a story about this, a Trojan horse, right? You remember that the Trojans could not penetrate the town of Troy. They didn't know how to get in. It was up against an ocean, rocks all around, one gate. You could spot the people, the invaders trying to come for miles. You could lock it down. And they had to do something creative. They had to build a gift. I call this gift value. They had to build a gift, a horse, and they put a couple of their guys in there and they put it in on the gates. And then they got in their boats and they sailed away. And in the nighttime, after the horse went in and the town of Troy was like, oh, that's cool. The other Trojans turned around, they snuck in, the others got out of the horse, unlocked the door. And now all of a sudden they win the war. And that's what we can do if we want to win the war of growing our podcast audience, is we use our value as our horse, as our gift, where we go onto that person's show, many different people's shows, whether we use Interview Valet and do it for paid, I think probably costs around $500 per time that you're on somebody. So it can get expensive, like $5,000 to do 10 or 10 grand to do 20. It can get a lot of money. Depends on our company and if we can monetize that or not. If we can, then it makes sense to do. A cheaper free way, not a highway, but a free way is for us to Podmatch and Podbooker. I'm good friends with the owner of Podmatch, Alex Sanfilippo's amazing man. In fact, I was just texting with him this morning, but his company, what they do is they connect podcast hosts with podcast hosts. And so you, with a little bit of effort by connecting with people in your genre, you can try to do interview swaps, or you can try to get interviewed on other people's shows by doing the work, or you can just pay like Pod Interview Valet to just get you on those shows. But another fantastic way to grow is Trojan horse marketing by adding value on other people's podcasts.
Yeah, for sure. A considerable amount of that already of being on other people's shows. I organically, again, I have a lot of, I have guests on my shows who tend to have their own shows. So sometimes we do swaps. I've used Podmatch before and some of these other, and also some of the Facebook groups, the podcast guest community and some of these other bigger ones. So it's definitely something I already try to do, but I know I could always be doing more because it's just free publicity. It's always a good thing.
What's your call to action? What's your call to action when you're there?
It depends on the content of the show. Usually I have a freebie like a lead magnet or something. So a 10-step morning routine or a morning affirmations or something like that I'll give away with to get people on my newsletter, or it'll just be listen to my podcast.
Yeah. I like both. One of them grows your company a little bit more. One of them grows your podcast a little bit more. I believe spending time up front, investing in the podcast growth can pay a lot of dividends, because if you have 100 listeners or if you have 3,500 listeners, then you can grow a lot more organically later with your whole business. And so I like to suggest, and not everybody agrees with me, I like to suggest only having a call to action for your podcast. I'll be honest, what my call to action is whenever I'm interviewed on somebody's show is I say, if you're listening to this and you like the content that I've been sharing, you should check out my podcast. It's free. It's called The Podcast on Podcasting. Go and check it out wherever you want. And there's a bunch of content that's perfectly for you if you're 2 years into your podcast or less, or if you're about to start. That podcast is for you. If you're already ready to pay me, if you already know that you want to hire me, just go to growyourshow.com and push the discovery call button. You and I can have a conversation and see what that looks like. But I put my emphasis on, you're already a podcast listener. Go and check out my podcast. You're already getting value from me right now. Get more value from me. And that's, instead of like the 10 ways to do this, the 10 steps to do this, the 3 steps, my lead magnet, I focus on get them over to my podcast, because then they'll start to trust you more. Maybe a small percentage of people will actually download your lead magnet from someone else's show. But a higher percentage will go and check out your podcast. And if you continue to add value to them, they're going to know you, like you, and trust you a lot more. And they'll be more likely to download that lead magnet later. So I want the listener, and for you, Paul, to just switch your calls to action to a compelling offer. Why do they have to listen to your podcast? What are they going to get out of listening to your podcast? If you want more of this, it's free. And you just go to this podcast that you're already listening to this show. Wherever you're listening to this, I'm there too. Just search for me in the bar. No more lead magnets. Focus on the one. Intention. Give that full intention. So.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. That's definitely true. I mean, growing the podcast is my number one priority, because I understand that through growing the podcast, that's like the top of the funnel, right? Everything else will come in to get, will come downstream from that. So like, that's why again, my question is all about growing my audience, because I know that if like you said, if I go from 100 people listening to every episode to 1,000, like that's going to equate to me making more money. Like there's just no way that it doesn't.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's about the strategies that I was thinking for growing your audience. What other questions did you have today?
I mean, the only other, I guess, a question that came from what you were talking about earlier about kind of doubling down and doing 2 episodes a week, or even an episode a day or something like that. So the length of my episodes have been around, so my solo episodes tend to be between 20 and 30 minutes. And then my guest interviews tend to go between like 35 minutes to some over an hour, right? Depends on the length of the conversation. But that's weekly, right? So, but if I'm doing more an episode a week or something like that? Like, is there a sweet spot for length or something? Like, should I be like that I'm actually doubling the content, or is it that like I'm cutting a hour episode in half and releasing 2 30-minute episodes? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't actually resonate so much with the people that cut episodes in half. I do, however, think that there's a lot of benefit that you can get when you take one idea and then you give it to us in bite size. I think it can be really smart. So for example, let's go back to the 10. You've got a lead magnet. It's the 10 ways to do what again?
So it's like a 10-step morning routine.
10-step morning routine. So you could record 10 episodes on these 10 steps, and there would be an option of doing all of them in 35 minutes, and there could be an option of doing 10 of them where they were between 3 to 6 minutes each. And you could say, hey, I think morning routines are so critical, so important, and you got to be a compelling salesperson. And if you don't do this, this is what you're losing out on. And that's why I'm making 10 episodes, one episode per step, where I can just pour into you on that one step that you need to know that day. And actually, I'm going to play these for the next 10 days. So you're going to be able to continue to hear them. You're going to hear each one. And I want you'll say as a call to action, I want you to implement whatever you learned today. I want you to start implementing it tonight, or I guess in the morning, because it's a morning routine, not a night routine. So I want you to implement it tomorrow morning, and then listen to the next episode and implement that one the following morning. Let's get started. Number 1, let's just pretend it's get 8 hours of sleep. And now you go through how to get 8 hours of sleep, what it's like, and give all the steps. And then you end the episode with some type of cliffhanger. Remember how smart TV got over all of the years of TV from the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, the 90s, the 2000s. They got freaking smart. They know how to do stuff. Well, we can just copy them and win. One of the things that they do is at the end of an episode, they already tell you a sneak peek of what you're going to get. So what's one of the numbers? What's number 2, for example, on your morning routine? What's number 2? Do you have that?
Yeah, you say your morning affirmations.
Okay, so what you'll say on the end of 1 is you'll end with, tomorrow we're going to talk about affirmations, and then you say something to the effect of, but a lot of people don't know how to do the affirmations. They think it's silly. They don't know what to say or how to say it. And we're going to frame the affirmations correctly and share it with you so you don't think it's just a floofy, fluffy thing. And I'll also show you the science behind what people are doing these affirmations. I'll see you on the next episode. So now people are like, whoa, okay, it's actually going to be exciting. He's actually going to say something that I haven't heard before. He's actually going to build the science behind it. It's not just going to be random fluffy thing. And he's going to show me the evidence for it and how I can make more money because I do the affirmations. You might say on episode 1 at the end, you might say, and I'm going to tell you a story about my client, John, who the only thing he would do is the affirmations. And he went from making $5,000 a month or any amount, $5,000 a month to making $26,000 a month by only adding the affirmations. I don't want you to miss out on that $21,000 every single month. I'll see you on the next episode.
I'm already now thinking about a lot. The one thing that's standing out the most to me from this whole thing, which I know to be true, is just more, right? Like more episodes, like even if they're in smaller bits. And this might be overthinking a bit, but like, does there have to be, or do you, in your experience, do you see, I know nothing has to be, right? There's no rules for this stuff, that like there should be some cadence to like, again, like a 3-minute episode versus an hour episode, and like that people want to have some sort of like reliability in what I'm doing. Do I have to make like a separate show, like to have like the mini show and then like the longer show, or can I just release episodes and then like some are long, some are short, some are tidbits, and some are like the whole thing in one long episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, if you have something that is more than 3 steps. Definitely if it's above 5. 100%, there's no question. If it's above 5, you probably want to split them up because people can't remember 10 things. I'm sorry. They can write them down, but nobody can remember 10 things. They can remember 1. They might be able to remember 3, and we could push their limits to remembering 5, but they're not going to know 6 or 10 or 12 or 20. So if you're going above that, go ahead and split it up. But as far as cadence and length of an episode needs to be however long to give good content. For me, on any time I respond to you, answer a question, when I do a solo episode by myself, I only try to add the value. I only try to give the most amount of value. If I can do that, if I can add all of this value to my listener, then I'm happy. I don't care if it's 3 minutes. I don't care if it's 6 minutes. I don't care if it's 10 or 20 or 30 or 35 or 1 hour or even an hour and 20. If I can get into a topic and I can give data, science, strategy, mindset, and it's all value, doesn't matter how long it is or how short it is. Now let's take a step back. If it is shorter, if the episodes are shorter, I don't want you to cut out good stuff that people need just so you can make it shorter. If it's shorter, all it means is that the person is able to listen to more in a shorter period of time. And so you will trigger some algorithm where it's the listen notes and listen score. Some people know what listen notes is. There's a global ranking and something called a listen score. A big portion of what a listen score is, the 2 biggest portions are people listening all the way through an episode? That's A. And B, are people listening to more than 1 episode at a time? More than 2, more than 3. If they're listening all the way through, and or if they're listening to multiple, your listen score is going to go up, and it's going to help you to be able to trigger some algorithms where you're going to get noticed. I don't want anyone to cut their stuff in half. I don't want somebody to say, we just had an interview with Adam or with Paul. We just had an interview with Amy or Carla or Amanda, and it was an hour and 20. And I was told that the common drive is 25 minutes. So I'm just going to randomly cut this into 3 episodes, 3 35-minute episodes, because, oh my gosh, nobody's going to be able to listen to this. And so I'm going to have a part of value, a different part of value, and a different part of value, but it's going to be awkward. We're just going to cut it off after it became an hour and 20 minutes. What's better is to actually say, this is a 3-part series. And in part 1, we're going to go over this. Part 2, we're going to go over this. And part 3, we're going to go over this. Let's get started. And then you just share that value. And then on part 2, you say, go back to episode 1 or the last episode where you got this. That's a precursor to what you're going to learn today. And then you share that. And then you end with the next one is going to be this. And so our way to think about this is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Give them a heads up about what they're going to get out of the episode or the series of episodes, and then give them the content of that, and then remind them of the value that you just gave them in a series of episodes or in 1 episode. If you do 3 episodes and you just randomly cut them just because of time, then they don't understand what they're going to get out of it. They don't get a full value ever, and they never have a wrap up. It's just awkward. So if you are going to split them intentionally. That's the word of the day again, is intentional.
Yeah, it seems like that's just the recurring theme here. And then that's going to be the big takeaway that I have from all of this is just more content, more value, and more intention.
Yeah, 100%. Any other questions that you have for me today?
No, not specifically. Honestly, this is already my brain is spinning with next steps and where I want to go from here. You give me a lot to think about already.
Cool. Paul, if you need anything else, you know where to find me. And if you're listening, Paul, do this too on your podcasts. If you're listening, and I know you are, then stay tuned because the next episode is a solo episode. It was great having Paul on, having him ask questions that you probably want to know as well. For example, he asked, how do I grow my podcast? He asked, how do I do this? How do I do that? What's the best way to do this? What's the cadence? What is the length? What's the intention? How do I do my organic? You learned a lot. But in the next episode, it's just going to be you and me. you, the listener, me, Adam, just pouring into you on stuff that I know you need to know. So don't go anywhere. Don't go away. I'll see you on the next episode.
I do have one more question though, just off of that.
Oh, sure.
You intro, outro stuff. Do you have that like pre-recorded, or do you do a fresh one literally every episode?
I have a pre-recorded intro, which is a woman voiceover artist who basically calls out my avatar. And she says something like, most hosts never see the value that they want out of their podcasts. They're falling short on listenership and monetization. This show was created to help you get a bigger listener and make money while you're at it. Here's your host, Adam. So it's like a 15-second intro that's always there with my original theme music. In the middle of most episodes, I didn't do it today. In the middle of most of my episodes, I have a commercial break, which is usually benefiting my company somehow. In a way, I'm like adding value to my listener with stuff that I know that they need. For example, I might talk about like, hey, that ad might say, if you're looking to get your very first affordable microphone or to upgrade your equipment, you need to go to growyourshow.com/PDF, and that you can download a PDF of all of the equipment that I vetted. It's microphones, it's this, it's that, it's lighting. And so that ad will come in, and then we'll finish the episode. At the end, I will let my listener know, just like I did right now. I'll say, I'll wrap it up. Remember, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So I'll say, here's some of the value that you got with Paul and I today. Paul and me, who cares? I'm not an English major. Here's some of the value that you got out of this episode. And I don't want you to go anywhere. I want you to keep listening because there's more value. I'll see you on the next episode. And then I have another pre-recorded outro. The way that my outros go is I've recorded probably 4. I actually don't know if it's 3 or 5 or 4, but I have multiple outros. Because what most people do, Paul, when they're doing their outro, what they will do that I don't believe in, I don't agree with, and I think it doesn't serve your avatar, your listener, is they will end it by trying to say everything that they want to say. They're like, go follow me on social. Here's my handles. Make sure you download my lead magnet. Here's where you get it. Make sure you subscribe to my show. Hey, if you like the content, rate and review the show. And also listen to the next episode. And also share it with your friend. And the listener's like, what the hell do you want me to do, man? You just told me like 90 things to do, or 7 different things to do. I don't know which one's important. And so what I've done personally is I've switched from having one giant thing with 7 mini calls to action that are not compelling ever. Go and subscribe, share it with a friend, download more, see you on the next episode, get my lead magnet. I only focus on 1 or 2 things, and that's it. And when I say 1 or 2 things, I say on my outro, it'll say something like, hey, you need equipment for your podcast, right? Or you need to upgrade the equipment. I've created a resource where I vetted all the equipment that you need. You can go to growyourshow.com/PDF and download the PDF now. I'll see you on the next episode. So it's 2 things. It's a compelling thing for the one thing that I want to say, and then see you on the next episode. It's 2 calls to action. That's the max you should have. On a different one, I might tell a story about bird church. Mm-hmm. I might say, hey, a long time ago, there was these birds and they were going to church and they couldn't fly or anything. It was really interesting. And one person was on the pulpit and he showed everybody, oh my God, just do this with your wings. And the whole church was like flying. They learned how to do it. They were doing it. They were excited about it. They were passionate about it. And at the end, they all walked home. And then, so I'll say on that outro just basically says, don't walk home. Anything that you learned today, go and implement it right now. I'll see you on the next episode. So it's this whole story about bird church, and then see you on the next episode. But it's one call to action. Do what the hell you just learned, and see you on the next episode. So that's what I do. I've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different outros, and each of them only have one thing that time. I like that a lot because I can spend time selling the one thing that I think that they should do, and it's always going to help my listener. And then I jump off, and a different one says a different thing. The other reason that I like it, besides being able to really be compelling, is that it's a different outro. The listener, most of the time, I haven't heard this before. This is new. versus, yeah, he's going to ask me to do 20 things. I'll just skip it. I like to have my listeners say, hey, I haven't heard that before, or I haven't heard that in a while. Oh, what is he going to say? All of those reasons why. But I have an outro after you and I say that. For interest of time, I want to say again to the listener, don't go away. See you on the next episode. Got value for you there.
Thank you.
If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of three things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.